No, absolutely. Who feels that they have got room to grow in prayer? Yeah, it's one of those things, and it's one of those ones. It's one of those disciplines, I think, prayer, because we never feel like we quite get it right, and it's the one thing that we always, if you talk to any Christian, it's the one thing that comes up as one of those things that they wish they were better at or could do more of, and that sort of stuff. So we're going to look at the basics of prayer today. I'd love to be able to do a whole day on it. I've been on quite a journey myself with prayer and fasting, particularly this last year, which I... Oh, yes, you do. Thank you, Callum. Yeah. Thank you very much, Scott. Thank you. Yeah. So prayer is one of those things, and we're gonna look at some basics and foundations because there'll be a range of experiences in this room. Some of you will still be new to it. Some of you would have tried lots of things, all the classic kind of. What do they have a load of acronyms, don't they, that you can follow, and ways to pray, and the self-help guide to praying and all that. So we're going to go through some real basics, but I also want to share from my experience as well. Just some things I've learned along the way, which I've been fortunate enough. I'm a big believer in if you've been through something and you learn something, it means you earn it, and then you share it. All right, so that's my thing. And there's some things I've learned, particularly this last year around praying, that I want to do. And it's foundation. Prayer is foundational. It's our key to our relationship with God. And as we saw a bit last night with Father Heart of God stuff, it's the key to who we are. All right, it's the key to our relationship. It is just basic communication with God. All right, and that basic communication gets more and more and more. How do you build relationship with your friends? Well, you don't never speak to them, do you? You actually have a conversation with them, and you tell them when they've upset you, or you may not, but you might, and there's all sorts of reasons around Father Heart to do with that, but you actually have a dialogue with them, don't you? We need to be people who constantly push in to God. And we'll all be on a scale on that, okay? So hands up who's awesome at praying to God, remembers God and prays to him really, really well when things are going well in their life. Who's that end of things when things are going well? That's good. No, that's good if you are. We go on the range. Who gets better at it when things are pretty naff? Yeah. I'm really funny because I've moved. Because of my journey with the Father Heart, when I was sitting where you were sitting, right, I never talked to God when things were bad. It was a no-go area. No thanks. But when things are going really well, I talk to him as much as you like. All right, so I was opposite. So I think it's important that we note kind of where our areas of strength are with praying, because we will all be good at something. I don't want us to beat ourselves up. We will be excelling somewhere in prayer. All right. So we're going to go on a bit of a journey in that. And I can't think of a better example than Jesus, because I think it's always good to look at Jesus' style of prayer, just as a little hint there. Can we look up those 4 passages? Can someone look up for me what Mark 1:35? Can someone look up that for me? Just stick your hand up just so I know someone. Who's going to look up that one? Thank you, Laurie. Can someone look up Mark 6:45? Thank you, Mark. Can someone look up Luke 5:16? Thank you, Alice. And Scott, would you look up Mark 6, verse 12? Is that all right?
You mean Luke 6:12?
Yes, what did I say?
Mark.
Excellent. We'll just go with Mark. Do you know what I mean? I'll just make it up. Look at this scripture. See what happens. Right, was it you, Laurie? Could you read Mark 1:35?
Sure. Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place to pray.
There you go. Who gets up early and goes to a solitary place to pray? A solitary place to pray.
Sometimes get up early, and I sometimes go off to a solitary place, but rarely together.
Yeah. Doesn't matter, on one level, ignore the time of day at the moment, but there is a place for praying on your own. So those of you who are sitting here thinking, I'm an extrovert, I can only be with people, especially when I pray, I'm an extrovert. You have got to discover a way of finding your alone time with God. And the more you journey with Father Heart stuff, the easier that will become, because you will want to spend time with God. All right, and there is something, those of you who have maybe got up early or done the late at night thing or done the 24/7 thing and you've took the 3 o'clock in the morning shift with your church, or do you guys do that? Do your churches do that? Have done that. 24/7 prayer. Sometimes churches do this thing where they'll pray for, 7 days, for 24 hours, but people will take shifts.
It's uninterrupted prayer for the whole week. So each hour is allocated to at least a minimum
Have you?
of one person.
Nice. So someone might sign up for a 3 o'clock in the morning slot.
That's weird. That's cool, but like,
I know, crazy, right?
I mean,
really
my church
amazing.
doesn't do communion, so I guess there's a lot of things I don't do.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine. Some churches, 24/7 isn't prevalent in my church, but I know churches that do that and have a culture of that. My church does other things. We've done crazy stuff like that before. But I think there's something about inconveniencing yourself to go to a place of solitude with God. Not to necessarily get something from God, but to have time on your own. Because I wonder now in this busy, busy world, how much time of silence do we actually give to God? Because I don't know about you, but my generation and below, which does include most of you, I don't know how you, but it's so easy, isn't it, to social media, music. I can hide behind prayer with worship music, easy. And don't get me wrong, there's a place for that. Worshipping and praying, absolutely. Just had a session on worship. There's an absolute place for having other stuff going on whilst we are praying. But there is something very powerful. One of the things I've cultivated this year, and that was actually for a very, very hard place and tough place, was solitude with God. Because I had nothing. I had nothing else. And that's something now I want to take into the next season of my life because I learned so much in that time. All right, so start to think about times on your own with God. Who did I give Mark 6:45 to? Because I couldn't honestly say thank you, Mark.
Title is Jesus Walks on Water. So immediately after this, Jesus insisted that his disciples get back into the boat and head across the lake to Bethsaida while he sent the people home.
Yeah, that's...
No,
that's fine. There's something about when, in the busyness of life and the busyness of our church ministries, all right, when things are going super, super well, how many of us afterwards retire to pray? Give that space back over to God. I'm not very good at that. If things are going super, super well, if I was like at the height of my ministry, like Jesus and the disciples, I can't honestly say to you right now, as I stand up here, I cannot honestly say that I would do that. I would just go from one thing to the other, to the other, to the other, riding on the wave of, gosh, God's in this is amazing. Yeah, he may very well be in it, but it takes a great deal of discernment, doesn't it, to withdraw and just get back to perspective, get back his Father's perspective, which we see Jesus doing often. Who got Luke 5:16? Thank you, Alice.
But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed.
Yeah, we've got it again, haven't we? We've got this constant reminder of Jesus withdrawing by himself. Sometimes he withdraws with the disciples, sometimes he doesn't. Sometimes he goes off on his own. There is always a time and a place. If Jesus needed to do it to get his Father's perspective, then how much more do? We need to do it. All right? So you've got to find a way of cultivating that in your life in terms of having your alone times with God. And lastly, Luke 6, verse 12, sorry. Luke 6:12.
One of those days, Jesus went out to a mountainside to pray and spent the night praying to God.
So we've got another time again, haven't we, where Jesus spends the entire night. Anyone ever done that?
Tried to.
Yeah, tried to. Good. Have you tried? Fab. How was it?
Not good. You get very tired.
Get very tired very quickly. What about you, Joy? How was yours? Yeah. And that's okay. Yeah, and that's okay. We're not here, we're not expecting anyone, and I don't think Jesus is expecting any of us to be superhuman. But again, I wonder whether there is something about that unsocial time of the day, whether that's at night or first thing early in the morning, that just frees us up from something. Either our work or our busyness or other people calling us. Don't know about you, but not many people call me during the night, thank God, unless it's an emergency. Not many people call me at 6 o'clock in the morning. There is something about freeing time up for God and giving him space at unsocial times. And I just wonder whether there is something of beauty of those times, particularly in the morning or sunset or sunrise, depending on how much you love nature and worshipping God at those times. There's all sorts of creative stuff we can do around that. So we've got another example of how to pray. We've obviously got the Lord's Prayer. So we're just going to go through that. If you struggle to pray, right? You could do a lot worse than saying the Lord's Prayer. Okay, if this is an area of struggle for you and you don't know what to say and you find it's a bit like a slot machine and I'm just asking all the time, or you just, I don't know, you're just all in a bit of a bind about it, you could do a lot worse than using the Lord's Prayer. And I'll explain a bit why as we go through, because you can just read the lines out, but actually there's so much more in each of those lines. I promised I wasn't going to use the word unpack. I've gone off that word. This needs to be unpacked. I've just decided I've gone off it. So I'm going to try and think of another word. But we do need to...
Dissect.
I said dissect, and Freddie was like, ooh, I like dissect. Yeah, it's a good word. We're going to dissect it then, Daniel. We'll dissect it. It is. Do you know what I love about prayer, though, guys? In all seriousness, everyone can do it. You only have to go into a hospital waiting room. Some poor family's just been told some horrific news. They probably aren't even Christians. I can guarantee they'll be shooting one up to God. All right, that's the beautiful thing about prayer. Anyone can do it anytime, anywhere, any day, any person, whatever their background. That's the beautiful thing for me about prayer. It's something that we can all do. But we have to grow it, unfortunately. It's one of those things we need to grow. We need to learn a bit more about. God will take you on a journey. The way you relate to God will then change how you pray to him. Some of you last night went on a bit of a journey in terms of your own father heart of God. I don't know how many of you find it easy calling God Dad, Daddy. I don't know. I found it incredibly difficult. Still a bit sketchy on that one. You know, I do it, but it's a little bit uncomfortable. But that's okay. I'm on that journey. Do you know what I mean? I'm a lot further along than I was, you know, a number of years ago. But it's about being willing to go on a journey with that and the things that surround that. Because prayer isn't just prayer on its own. It's how we feel about prayer. It's how we feel about God. It's how we feel about ourselves. It's what we're currently walking through in our lives. All right, and we need to be mindful of that, whether things are good, whether things aren't so good, how we respond to that. All of those things are massive, massive factors in our prayer life and how much we give space to it as well. So, let's start with the Lord's Prayer. All right, so the first thing we've got is prayer as an intimate thing. All right, the whole idea of that first line, our Father in heaven, is designed to put us in a place of intimacy with God. So as you can imagine, if you've got problems with God as a father, immediately that's going to be quite hard. All right? But my encouragement to you is go on that journey, practice. You don't have to call him Dad straight away. You might want to change some of the wording around it. It's okay. You're not changing the Lord's Prayer in the Bible. You're changing it to fit you. All right? But it's a central cry of the human spirit in all cultures. All cultures have a prayer kind of life. It's sometimes directed to the wrong thing, but it is... We have got that. You know, the Garden of Eden paints a beautiful picture of God and humans in completely an unbroken relationship where we just talk freely to God. Imagine that, hey? And that's what prayer is. That's what God wants us to be like in our prayer life. You know, sometimes we may not hear him or there's things that can get in the way. We know that, but he wants that dialogue with us. It's all about relationship. It's about spending time with him, not just to get answers. You know, which we all fall into the trap of, don't we? I'm honest, you know, I'm constantly asking for things. Do you know what I mean? Please this, please that, please the other. Please can I have this? You know, and actually sometimes it's just about hanging out with God. Have you ever just been quiet with him? Have you ever just asked him to be present with you and you in his presence and maybe not said anything? I don't know. Have a little play around with this thing called prayer. You'll be amazed at what starts to happen. All right, and don't set expectations on yourself because that's the worst thing you can do. I did that a few years, actually it was on my DNA. I decided one day, I think it was probably after the session, I was going to, you know, revolutionise my prayer life and go up a mountain. I didn't go up a mountain, I went up a large hill in Loughborough, Beacon Hill. Do you know? Yeah. Do you know it, Callum? No. No, so it's a hill that looks over the town, and I'm a bit outdoorsy and rather be outdoors than indoors, so this was ideal for me. And I had this big kind of plan that I was going to go and spend time with Jesus, and, you know, I was really going to, you know, just engage with him and this, that, and the other, and I came down so disappointed because I put so much expectation on this amazing moment that was going to happen, you know, this amazing thing that was going to change my life forever. And it was only when I walked down at the bottom that I sensed God say to me, you put so much expectation on yourself. I was already there with you, but you were just raising the bar for yourself too high. And then I was able to chuckle to myself a little bit. But it was around Father Heart stuff as well. But yeah, just go on an adventure with no expectation of yourself, okay? And it's about allowing God to father us. I think I said it last night in the lead up to worship, or halfway during the worship, I sort of said that some of you need to allow God to come close to you. Yes, it's about us pursuing him. Of course it is. But some of you need to allow him, or stop for long enough for him to come to you in those moments as well. And they're special times. Prayer is praise and worship. We've just had a session on worship, so you'll probably know this more than I. You know, worship is, it's all about kissing towards, to lean towards, to bend into God. You know, it's about the friendship, a fear of knowing God, and worship and praise, as you know, can mean all sorts of things. You know, it might be for you declaring the names of God. I have a friend who did that for a while. She just declared all the different names of God as part of her prayer and part of her praise, because it just took her away from asking. She started to focus on God rather than herself, focus on who he is, not who she was, and all her family. You know, so sometimes it is about maybe just praising who he is and what he's done as well, which, you know, I shared at the beginning of the last session. Your kingdom come, your will be done. We'll do a bit on this in a little bit around intercession. Okay, that idea of your will be done as an act of surrender. How many people like that word, surrender? Oh, good. Good. How many people can do it really well with God? We mixed it. I hated that word, especially in my DNA year. It's horrendous. Meant letting go of control, letting go of my emotions, trusting. It was all sorts of funny stuff going on for me then. But actually, it is about his kingdom coming. Okay, we want prayer to be an intercessory thing. Okay, do you know? We'll talk about intercession in a bit. Actually, we'll leave that for now. But praying for other people, praying for your church or your community or your family, you know, and essentially asking God's will to be done. All right, just allowing him to change your heart as well. It's not a passive thing. It's about allowing God to speak to you in your spirit and in your heart as well. There's so much I could say on that. The Great Commission is a prime one, you know, in terms of we're all called to go to other nations. All right, how many of you pray for another country? Oh, yay, nice. A people group in that other country, or country itself, or?
I've had, I remember years ago when the Iron Curtain was falling down, praying going on.
Yeah, fantastic, absolutely. Alice, you? For a country, absolutely. Yeah, how many of us do that? You know, go outside of our own nation, our own people group, and think, oh, I tell you what, I'm called to go and make disciples of other nations. Well, actually, in order for that to happen, there's got to be some prayer that goes behind it as well. Some people groups have never heard the name of Jesus yet, even now, in this day and age. All right, and so some of those of you who are interested in Kairos will do a lot more on this, a lot more on prayer for people groups and that sort of stuff. But yeah, just a thought. What would it look like to include or to ask God to place a people group on your heart or a nation on your heart? Oh, what would that look like? Crazy, you know. Prayer is petition, just asking God for what you need that day. We're very blessed in this country, aren't we, in that we pretty much have what we need materially on the whole. Some of you will be asking literally God for money this year to pay your fees or to get you through to next term. I don't know, but it's about humbly asking and actually having to put your trust in something. How many of you have ever done something like that in terms of you've actually needed something and you've decided to lean on God and not maybe tell anyone, but it might be in a car, it might be finances, it might be, I don't know, all sorts. Yeah? How does it work out for you?
Very well.
Yeah? Good. That's good.
I've made myself, because I'm by default a bit of a control freak, so you know this. But deliberately not. So, you know, like I'm going to do my bit, but God, you're just going to have to turn up for this last bit, and I'm going to make myself, I'm going to laugh at that crap. If you don't do your bit here.
Yeah. Nice, yeah. He is deep in prayer. Look at him, like he's praying for you as we speak. But yeah, some of you will be stretched in faith this year for some areas. You know, go on that journey, see what happens. You know, you win some, you lose some, but God will stretch you in that. You know, I actually don't have a problem anymore in where a car is going to come from, because God's provided so many times for me in terms of giving me cars, people giving me cars, and He's given me money for cars, and it's happened now about 5 times. So I now don't really have an issue with God providing for me with a car, you know. And I know that's stretching me, because there'll probably be something bigger further along the line that I need to stretch my faith for and pray for. So it's quite exciting. Prayer is a confession and forgiveness. This is a big one. You get a session on forgiveness later on in the year, which is so important. Some of you will do the workshop on this, but actually there is something really powerful in this, and allowing the Holy Spirit to convict you. Some of you did that Monday night. You shared what you shared because you genuinely felt God was pushing you or pushing that button in you. So confessing and repenting of your sins, that's massive. If you can keep short accounts with God and one another and other people and your disciples. You might have disciples, I don't know. You will go far. All right, that is so big. I can't tell you, the biggest block to prayer is unforgiveness. All right, so if you know you've got an area of unforgiveness in your life, all right, whether it's forgiving yourself, because that will be true in this room. Some of you will be struggling with forgiving yourself, or whether it's forgiving others. All right, go on that journey of dealing with it, because that will put a block. Oh, God's not putting the block there, but it will be a block for you just because of what's going on in your heart as well. Preparation and warfare: lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. You know, it's preparing us. It's acknowledgement of our weakness and dependency on God, asking for deliverance, God intervening, asking for God's wisdom, recognizing that we're in a battle. You know, I've never learnt this more than this last year, and I now take it extremely seriously. And you would probably think I was a bit precious about it, but I have seen the effects of when it is not done, and it's not fun. All right, so the more you go on with God, and the deeper you go in Him, particularly this year, my encouragement to you is, one, yourself, get on your knees and pray for your protection, put on your armour of God and that sort of stuff, but get others around you doing it as well. We're very blessed on DNA in that we do have a group of intercessors who do pray for you. You don't know them. It's wonderful. We're very blessed. We have people all around the country and the world, actually, who are praying for you right now because of the nature of the week that you are on here. So you've got that. You'll have people who you know, your family, friends at church, who will be praying for you and just seeking God for you for this week, for Him to break through into your life and into your areas. But it's important that we are covered. And by covered, I mean spiritually covered. All right, I could say a lot more on that, but if you want to know more, just come and talk to me. But it is important that we take this seriously and also think about who we're praying for as well. If you say you're going to pray, I'm really big on that now, because I know it's so easy, isn't it? You know when you get a text or a WhatsApp and someone says, please pray, and you think, oh yeah, I'll do that, and then you forget. So I do it then and there now, even if it's a God, please bless this person, because at least I know with integrity, I've asked God to bless them, and then I can go away and do it more extensively. But it's so easy, isn't it, just to forget as well. But it's really important. And with all of these things, with all of the Lord's Prayer, you can add to it what you want. So, you know, when you pray, my Father in heaven, hallowed be your name, you can then start praising and worshipping and saying, oh, you are this to me, God, you are that to me, God. If some of you are struggling with the Father heart stuff, speak out your truths in that section of the prayer. You know, and go through each of them and add stuff that's relevant to you as well. So it's just a creative way of thinking about praying, all right, just to start off this thing of looking at prayer in our lives. When prayers aren't answered, how many of us have got an unanswered prayer going on at the moment? Yeah, me too. Yeah, it's rough, isn't it? It's not nice. How many of you have had prayers answered recently? Maybe in the last week or so. Yeah, last year. Wonderful. So it's a mix, isn't it? There'll always be stuff in our lives that we see. I don't understand why some things are instant, some things take years, and some things we're still waiting for. All right, but what I do know is I serve a good God. All right, and that's a place ultimately we need to get to. But there is a little kind of a checklist we can look at just to kind of make sure we've done everything we can, you know, in order for God to do all that He can. We're not taking the job of God. That is not our job to do, and some of us will want to do that. All right, that's fine. We all have little things that we do out of insecure places or need to control or things like that. But there are some things we can think about. Attitude of our own hearts is a big one. All right, attitude of our own hearts is massive. Okay, we need to check out where that's coming from. Either what we are asking or how we are dealing with it, where it's doubt or anger or whatever. God can handle all of that. All right, if you look at some of those, we haven't got time to go through the passages, unfortunately, but like the Psalm 66 one talks about cherishing sin in your heart. Right, that's going to be a big block. Okay, this is why keeping short accounts with your discipler and other people and with God is going to be key. God's not asking you to be perfect. He knows that's not possible. It isn't possible. All right, but some of you on Monday night did a good old clearing out of your rubbish, you know. And you'll probably find that it might be a bit easier to hear from God now, or you might start seeing just other things start to happen because you're not carrying the burden. It's not that God is refusing to bless you because, you know, you're doing that wrong. God's not like that, but it gets in your way because you feel so rubbish. All right? The Isaiah one talks about rules, following rules and heart being far from God. So again, it's about just checking your heart in terms of legalism and just religiosity and things like that. Pride, that's a big one. There's Matthew and Luke quoted there. You know, check the attitude of your heart. All right? And also it's about sometimes doing the prayer in the quiet places. You know, it's important to be accountable, so do let your discipler know if you have got unanswered prayer. Let someone in on that. No one's asking you to do that by yourself. All right? But it's important that we just check ourselves. Double-mindedness and doubting is massive. It's in James 1 verse 6. You know, when we're a bit at the mercy of the waves. So 1 minute we're over here praying for this, and then we change our mind. We're, you know, and our mind, you'll know when you've got it because it will feel confusing. All right, it will just feel like a big confusing mess in your brain. All right, but it's important that I think we need to learn how to wrestle. I really do. I think like Jacob in the Bible, we have got to learn how to wrestle with God. Because God's big enough for all of that. If you think God can't handle your anger, you're wrong. All right? I think God would rather, if you're really hacked off with him, unanswered prayer or whatever, there's something to be said about that relationship. If you can go up to him and you know, just let it all out, have a good old go. 1, you'll feel better. 2, God's not put off by your anger. All right? In fact, he welcomes it because he knows you're angry. All right? Those of you who've got younger brothers and sisters or had younger brothers and sisters or when you were younger, you know, their emotions are still quite immature. But there's nothing, I love it when I see parents, and I will be the same. I love it. If a child is angry, let them be angry because that's what they're feeling. Yes, then you need to help them, and God will then help you. But at least it gets it out rather than bottle it away. We're very good in the certain, I don't know what it's like in Kenya, Joy, but in Britain, we're quite good at masking and not showing our emotions. I don't know what it's like in Germany or, you know, but is that fair, guys, from the UK? Stiff up, we have this phrase, stiff upper lip. Have you heard of that? Yeah. Oh, I love it. She says it goes beyond. And I think in some ways that's a curse on us. I really do. Because I don't think we are as free. We're not asking you to be someone you're not, but I think there is something about, if you can't be real with God, who can you be real with? All right, and it's part of building relationship because then your trust will build with him as a father. I know with my own relationship with my own dad, which is very interesting. Some of those lies that we read out last night, you know, I still have to revisit some of those, you know. I still have to watch that, you know, and it does have an implication with my relationship with God, and the whole expressing my emotions with him was non-existent, you know, when I first started out. So, you know, it's really important that we do that and that we be people who are real and genuine, you know, because with your friends, your really close friends now, are you quite expressive? Do you let them know when you're hacked off or when you're upset or when you're sad? So if you're like that with your friends, we really need to be like that with God, don't we? So we need to learn how to wrestle. And ultimately, we need to learn, and we don't need to learn at all, it's a revelation thing. If your prayers aren't answered, it's getting to that place where you can honestly say with fullness of heart and truth that God is good. And that's not easy. And I'm certainly not saying that to you contritely, because you have to go on a journey to get to that point. I had to go on a journey with a couple of things in my life to get to that point where it didn't matter whether that got answered or not, God was still good. And when I got to that point, it was the most freeing thing I've ever been through. Does it mean I stop praying? No, it doesn't. Does it mean I don't get frustrated sometimes? No, it doesn't. But I've got unanswered prayer in my life. My dad is still not a Christian, you know, and I actually struggle with faith for that now, but that's okay. That's all right. I have other people praying for him as well. You know, but this is frustrating. All right? So it's okay. And also, just to recognise, without super spiritualising it, we do have opposition, okay? We are in a battle. The enemy doesn't want certain things, so that's why it's important, if you have got unanswered prayer in your life, do include other people, because they might see things from a different perspective and a different angle, and be able to tailor your prayers maybe a bit more strategically or things like that. Because I'm a bit of a believer in strategic praying for people, which I'll talk about in terms of intercession in a bit. Is that all right? So in terms of effective prayers, let's end on the positives. Never nice talking about unanswered prayers, but it's important to acknowledge that we've probably each got them. Is there such a thing as an effective prayer? I think all prayer is heard, if I'm honest. But I think there are some things that make prayers a bit more effective. Praying changes us as well. I don't know if you've ever thought of that. It's like a double-edged sword. As we pray, we also get transformed. It's a really weird thing. There's a few things like that under God that happen. Great Commission is one of them. As we engage more in the Great Commission, we ourselves get transformed. It's bizarre. I love it. It's the economy of God, which is just abundant with blessing. But it's the same with praying. The more we do it, the more we will be transformed as well. Okay, so there's a few little scriptures there in your notes. One I particularly want to hone in on is the John one, actually not the one that's on the screen. Oh, it's actually the one on the screen. 1 John 5, that one. It talks about remaining in him and he will remain in us. And I think there's something really powerful about that. Hanging on to God, all right, in all situations and remaining in him. And it kind of doesn't matter. I mean, it still does matter, obviously, but it doesn't matter what comes your way or what doesn't come your way, because your position in him will be so strong. Okay, I've still got a long journey on this to go, but I know I'm stronger now than I was 10 years ago in God. There's not much that could shake me. Now, certainly what shook me 10 years ago, I've come a long way in that. Yes, there's more to do, but there's not much that could, because I hang on sometimes for dear life, and I'm sure we all feel a bit like that sometimes, hanging on for dear life. Some of you might even feel that this week, that you're hanging on for dear life in God. But remain in him, and he will remain in you. Prayers are answered by God's grace, all right? So we don't get this out and tick it off and say, well, I've done all of that, God, where are you? But God does look at our heart, okay? And that's a little bit what this week's been about, isn't it? And you're probably picking up by now that DNA cares about my heart, and because we do care more about who you are rather than what you do. Have you picked that up yet? If you haven't, I've just told you. All right, bit of a giveaway, but it's true. All right. If God knows what we need, why do we pray? That's down to relationship, isn't it? Yes, it's humble having to ask, but it's also giving God an opportunity to talk to you. Yeah. Who loves it when God just whispers something to them, or they just get a sense of something, or a thought pops into their head? Isn't it lovely? It's lovely. Maybe some of you have never done that before in terms of what a thought. Yeah, God can do all that. It's crazy. If God can hear us, why shout? I think for me this goes back to the anger thing. It's also about expressing yourself, even in the good stuff. You don't have to do this in a public setting. It could be in your room. I don't know how it works for you. Sometimes for some of us it's a self-image, self-worth thing, which is why we don't express who we are. If you're naturally not that way inclined, that's fine. But if you know you are, start asking yourself, why aren't I expressing more if I know in other spheres? You only got to look at a football match or any sort of sporting occasion. You know, all these chants and cheering and da-da-da-da. The second you put those people, the Christian lot in them, into a church setting, it's all very formal. And I sometimes wonder what the difference is. Why aren't they the same? Can you imagine that on church on a Sunday morning? That'd be great. Do you know what I mean, though? As in being consistent in all areas of your life. Praying in the Spirit. This is about speaking in tongues. The Bible talks about the prayer is all rooted in the Holy Spirit and Holy Spirit prompted. Sometimes that's our own language, sometimes our native language. Sometimes it's about praying in tongues as well. And some of you will do this, some of you won't. It's okay. All right, we're going to do more teaching on this. All right, praying in tongues doesn't go against our understanding, but beyond it. So some of you will be struggling with this because you just don't understand it. And you're analysing it, and you're trying to... unfortunately, it's not one of those things that can be analysed, I'm afraid. All right, it's something... Some of you have spoken in tongues for the first time this week, which is amazing. All right, this is great. But it's about just allowing God to speak to you about that and going on a journey. It doesn't make you any more or any less of a Christian. Let me just say that right now. All right, but allow yourself to go on it and maybe asking a few questions. Tongues is about edifying ourselves. So you might hear in your small groups people praying in tongues under their breath, particularly the leaders of your small group. I know I do it. That's just to try and get myself, in God so I can hear for you, for those in my small group. And then if I do speak it out loud, that needs an interpretation. All right, or if someone gives a public tongue, that needs interpretation. All right, but the personal stuff is just between you and God. All right, it might be you interceding for something. It might be you might not even know what you're praying. You just know you're praying in tongues, and it feels like something in particular. But please don't be hard on yourself if you don't speak in tongues. All right, we have a session on spiritual gifts where we explore this a bit more. There's worksheets on this. If you want to talk to us a bit more, you can. The best advice I ever got given was actually on my DNA year, because I didn't speak in tongues, was stick some headphones in with worship music on fairly loud so you can't hear yourself, because I was just analysing what I said and it's like, no nonsense, so I couldn't hear, and just try it. You'll soon know. God can take that. God's not going to go, well, that's not saying anything to me. He's not going to do that, because if your heart is, a desire for the gift of tongues, then he will meet you in that. All right? We see examples of prayer changing things. It does change things. It can change direction of things. It can push back boundaries, which leads us nicely on to intercession. All right, which we will talk about as well. Intercession in the Old Testament, okay? It occurs 46 times, all right? And it's grouped into 3 ways. Well, I could be a Pete Gilbert now, and the Hebrew word is paga, but it's not really my style, but that's there if you like your little translations of Hebrew and Greek. All right.
What's the word?
Paga. It's in your notes. P-A-G-H-A. Paga. It's great. Love that word. So there are 3 different sort of styles of intercession in the Old Testament. Okay, you've got to light upon or to meet by chance. You've got that 13 times. One particular is Jacob's ladder, where Jacob has a dream and he sees the angels coming down from heaven, and there's the kind of this cycle effect. All right, how many of you have just come upon a situation and you just felt drawn to pray, or something's popped into your head and you just know you've got to pray? Yeah. My advice to you is always go with it, even if it's crazy and you don't understand why. I've had a few situations like that. Some I've seen the result of, some I haven't so much. But I've learned now enough to know that if something pops into my head, or I suddenly feel stirred by something, or I dream about something that makes me want to pray for someone, I just do it now. Do you know what I mean? I just do it out of obedience now. Because you just never know. I had a scenario a few years ago now where my dad's stepmum was my last kind of grandparent alive, and hadn't seen her in a while. Not an easy lady to get on with, and my dad doesn't talk to her or visit. And I just felt really prompted. I just was driving near her, and I felt such an urge to go round. And I was like, oh no, what am I going to find? You immediately think, oh my goodness, God, you've prompted me, and what am I going to find? And I went round, and she was there, she was fine, and gave me a bit of a earful about not being married for a while. But once we got through that, we were fine. And I then committed to going around every week. And this was about October time, so I did that most weeks when I could, apart from residentials and stuff like that. And I found out that she had spent the last 4 or 5 Christmases on her own, which bothered me greatly, and I wasn't happy. Because she did have other family, but I thought I was really bothered by that. So I went round Christmas morning, had bacon sandwiches, classic. And And just spent time with her and carried on doing that. And then I think it was around February, March time, I arrived back, ironically, from a 2-day block, and I'd done this weekly thing. I'd arrived back to the news that she passed away whilst I'd been away. And I tell you what, I was so grateful. I was so grateful that I had listened to that prompt and gone round and committed to those 6 months of spending time with her and building relationally again. It was just brilliant. And then at her funeral, it was really lovely because she was Salvation Army. One of the ladies came, the leader, I don't know what they call, captain or something like that, isn't it? Came up to me and said, "Oh, you must be Joanne. She talked about having bacon sandwiches with you on Christmas morning." And it wasn't about me and that I'd done the right thing. I actually felt quite humbled, if I'm honest, and that really floored some of my family who realised they hadn't done anything, you know. But it was just, I just really felt grateful to God, and I've committed ever since to any nudge I feel, short of, you know, sinning, any nudge I feel, I will follow. Because you just never know what God will open up for you. You know, and it was great. It was great. So to fall upon or to strike, that's quite attacking, isn't it? Intercession is an assault, all right? It's about sometimes going into warfare, all right? It is about, I love that Joy. Joy's there. She's ready. I love it. But it is, though. It is. I've learned something this year about warfare that I've never learned in my Christian walk up until now. I know it exists, and I've seen it, and I've prayed for people with certain things, but I've had to battle this year. So I've learned some of this sort of stuff. And I've got angry, actually. I've got angry at the situation or things that have happened to people close to me and myself, and I've stood and I've got miffed. That's putting it lightly. There was more choice words than that, but I've got angry at what was going on in terms of spiritual warfare. Boundaries and borders. Okay, so keep pushing the boundaries and borders. We see that in Joshua, actually, most. So what we want is we want to increase our territory in our land or our church's land or whatever, you know, anything that was inherited for us, nations as well. The enemy will always try and squash. He will always try and enclose in. I love it. Your church, Laurie, you've just got, and Callum, you've just got a new building, haven't you? Brilliant. That's probably a massive answer to prayer and a long, long journey as well. You've now got land, you know, and it's about pushing and making sure you push. I don't know if you've felt a backlash at all.
Well, just go back to that last point. We've had a right battle in the way for that.
Indeed, that does not surprise me. Some of you even coming on this week. I don't know how your weeks were last week. Were they good? Were they bad? Bad? A bit iffy? Yeah, I'm not surprised. You're coming on this week. I have to watch it now. Every time, I've been doing this now for over 10 years. I know it now. I'm so used to it, I can clock it a mile off. It used to be I was ill every year before the first residential. Now it's not illness, it'll be something else now, but I've clocked it. You know, it's just about being wise and get people praying. You know what I mean? Just pushing him back. He doesn't belong there, all right? He doesn't belong. One of you have got Impacting the Cities as a book. That's about pushing it back for cities. And, you know, there'll be things going on in your cities or your communities that, you know, you can pray into and push back. You know, the enemy wants to steal, rob, and destroy. All right? And if he has any opportunity, he will. All right? So we're people who can counteract that. Not foolishly. We need to grow in this and learn. Yeah.
I have a real struggle with, we spoke about this at church ages ago, about cat and dog theology, or whatever, how you pronounce it, but it was practically preying on it. So obviously cat's thinking that, in a sense, you feed me, you pet me, you roof me, I must be God. And dog's thoughts is you feed me, you pet me, you roof me, you must be God. And that thought of praying towards God for yourself, or praying towards others. I was just thinking, is like, when does it come to that point where you're going, okay, maybe you're being a bit selfish with your prayers?
Yeah. For me, it's about having a healthy mix, because I think it's absolutely okay that you pray for yourself. Absolutely okay. God wants to bless you, all right? And there'll be things you'll be praying for yourself off the back of this week, like, God, you've really highlighted Father Heart stuff in me, and I really want to ask you to really meet me in that. You know, and that's okay. All right? And there'll be seasons where that's this is a year for you. It's not a year to be self-indulgent, but it's a year for you, isn't it? So you might find it's more of that this year. But it's not about forgetting the other stuff, though. So it's about, how can I do a nice mix where I don't feel it's all about me? Because I'm like that. I don't want it to be all about me. Yes, Joy?
Just on this topic of pray, how much can you pray for yourself or for others? Or whatever?
Yeah.
I had a friend. I have a friend who is Ismaili. She's from Iran, so she's a Muslim. And the first day we met, we shared a room because we had just a scholarship weekend thing. So we shared a room, and so we prayed together. She asked, "Can we pray?" And I was shocked because okay, we don't share the same faith, and she knows I'm a Christian. I know she's Muslim, but so she said something. She prayed, and I prayed, and she was like, afterwards, she was like, "Joy, I've never had anyone pray for others like you do. I didn't know that was a thing. Is that a Christian thing or is it a youth thing? Because I just
Wow.
She was shocked. She was so shocked.
Prayed.
She was praying for herself and for me because I was there.
Yeah.
But I prayed for all the other people who did this scholarship thing and families and whatever. And she was just like, "Is that a thing actually?" So, I don't know. I guess it could make us stand out.
Yeah, totally. It's about having a healthy mix, I think. It's not right or wrong. It's just making sure we do both.
I suppose if you've got a friend and all they ever do is talk about themselves, you'd be a little bit like, is it a friendship?
Well, that's my fear sometimes, is that thought of when expanding on this.
Sorry?
When people text saying, because I hate it, literally when I'll say to my mum, can we pray together? And she'll be like, yeah, sure. But when it's saying to others, it's almost that fear of self-indulgence. It's just a bit, and it's like, if you're going to pray for yourself, pray for yourself. Don't get others to do it.
Why?
I don't know, it's just that thought.
And it is a careful balance, and depending on, again, for me, this is about heart. All right, we've got a delightful session tomorrow, which I know you'll all be looking forward to, on self-image and self-worth, which none of you struggle with in this room. And it's about checking, actually, am I not asking others to pray for me because actually I don't feel worthy and I don't want to bother them and I don't want to be a burden? I'll be really honest, I still have to watch that even now. I have to keep that in check because people want to pray for me, but they don't know to unless God tells them to, or I activate myself and just humbly ask. But I think you're right. I think it is about having a nice, healthy balance. So find the things you want to pray for, whether it's your friends or your family. I have all sorts of things I do. I have an alarm go off on my phone. I think it's 12 o'clock every day. Pray for Dad. So I do just a quick prayer. I've done that for years and years. But I do, it's about just doing different things and keeping it fresh and creative. Especially if you are naturally creative and you like that style. If you like structure, set yourself certain things. But I can guarantee you this. One thing I can guarantee you, if you do expand your prayer life to other things, particularly other nations and people groups and other faiths, God will do an amazing, amazing thing in you. All right? But there is nothing wrong in you asking for prayer for yourself. Nothing whatsoever. All right? We do it as a team all the time. Please pray for me. I'm going through this, and this. All right? I've got a lot of people praying for me at the moment as I head towards marriage, because I need it. And we need it. It's important. Do I feel selfish? No, because it's a mix. But check yourselves as well. As if you do struggle with those sorts of things, why? Just ask yourself what is going on as well. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Intercession in the New Testament, as you can imagine, it is mentioned 46 times. All right, again, similar thing, to make appeal, to light upon by chance, meet accidentally, an encounter. Like I said to you, there are people praying for you even now, and you don't even know them. All right, for whom and by whom is, Jesus. We've got examples of Jesus all the time, interceding for us in Hebrews and Romans. He intercedes for us with God. All right, for people, for individuals, we've got examples of that in Romans. It might be as churches, you pray for a particular people group. One of my favourite things, I wish all churches did this, is if a church adopted a people group. And it might be a people group in your neighbourhood, or my own personal heart is a people group that they don't even know, cross-cultural, other faith, who don't know Jesus and they just adopt them. You know, no one will ever probably know, but God does, and you just don't know what can happen. And I love that when that happens as well. And by people for society. You know, we see that in Timothy. You know, it might be that your church prays for the city. How often does your church pray for the community that it's in as a whole, and particularly addressing the issues? That, for me, is strategic prayer. Does anyone here know of an intercessor? You'll know an intercessor because restricting them to 5 minutes of prayer is like torture for them. That's an intercessor. It's when they can go, well, I have 3 friends who I know absolutely are, one in particular, and you don't ask her to say grace at the dinner table. And it's true, and we laugh about it because she just can't. She just can't confine herself down. And she will pray for, I don't know how long she goes for, but she goes for it. You know, some of you in this room, God might have earmarked to be an intercessor. We're all called to intercede, all right? We're all called to do that. But some of you may actually be intercessors in this room, all right? Powerful people. My mum has just entered into this realm. It's quite funny. So I just call her now. She's great. I'm like, Mum, please pray for this. And I know she will. It's brilliant. She goes for it.
This is coming to a long line, but with grace, saying grace, I had someone who challenged me on this. He was actually a Christian.
He actually was from Scotland originally.
Yeah.
And he was saying he couldn't stand saying grace. And he was like, why? And he just said, well, I thank God anyway through prayer.
Yeah, totally.
What is like the actual original song?
I would imagine, I don't know officially, but I would imagine it came from a time where you had to thank God for food. Do you know what I mean? So it's just a place of doing that and just being super mindful, where I'm quite similar. So where I do that, I do thank God, and I will say grace if I'm in the presence of people who like saying grace, but equally I don't beat myself up if I don't. And I know people who go far this end and you just can't eat unless you say grace. And for me that slips into religion a little bit, not always, but it can slip into religiosity, whereas I much prefer the free flow if I remember, or I say I thank God anyway. Do you know what I mean? So it's much more relaxed.
I suppose it comes in the 21st century Great Britain. We're pretty fortunate, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, there was a time not that long ago.
That's fine.
So we're very thankful.
Yeah. And I think sometimes it's important that we just stop, even though we are fortunate, and it's good to say grace, because for ourselves, it's actually, otherwise I could take this for granted. You know, so again, there's all sorts of, it's heart for me. It always goes back to heart. You know, always does. You know, I wouldn't be religious about it, so we don't say grace here. You might say grace on your table, but we don't officially stand at the front and do anything grand, but if someone was to, fine. That makes sense, is that right? Yeah.
When Chris was with us the other day, he actually quickly said grace before we started eating.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah. I think that's lovely. I think sometimes it's important. It's so easy to take for granted, particularly in this day and age, isn't it, what we do have, and sometimes it is about just pausing for a minute, especially if you see something on television or what's happening around the world, just reminding ourselves how blessed we really are. Wow, running out of time. Haven't even got on to fasting yet. Look at that. Classic. I'm always the same every year. It gets to 5 o'clock. Excellent. And yeah, just please be aware of God nudges and I love it. God does that to me more and more now by dreams, and just someone pops into my head. Just go with it. Even if you feel silly, just go with it. All right. In the book of Acts, if you want to explore prayer more, you could do a lot worse. Prayer is mentioned 30 times in 28 chapters. All right. So it's kind of important. All right. And it's preceded by certain things like sending out of the apostles, and when they choose certain people. So they view prayer before important decisions as really key.
You know what it says there?
How many of you prayed before doing DNA? Yeah. Of course, it's a big decision, isn't it? It's like, you know, and again, we could go anywhere with this. Some people wait for God to say a yes or a no, or you just carry on walking until God stops you. That's often been my case with prayer. Sometimes he'll say yes or no and give me an answer, but often he'll say it's your choice, or it feels all right and feels good, so I just keep going. You know, that's hard when you want a yes or a no. But prayer for the nations. We've talked a bit about that. The Great Commission. We're all called to make disciples. We're all called to go to the ends of the earth and to make disciples. But in order to do that, we've got to pray. All right, people forget about that. So we're all called to do it. So we're all actually called to pray for other nations, I would argue. All right? So whether that's people from other faiths who live in your area, you could do a lot worse than starting to pray for them, or gathering some people to do that. All right? Or it might be praying seeds for revival and things like that. There's a lot being said around the UK at the moment. I don't know if you're picking that up around your churches. A lot being said about God's on the verge of something. There's something going on in the spirit, which is amazing, and I hear it all over, and I hear it in my neck of the woods in Norfolk as something's brewing, and something's going on in the people of God as well. So just keep praying into it and see what happens, you know. Absolutely. When revival hits, Elliot will be there with his cup of coffee. Why not? And also, this isn't about the spiritual side of things. Think about the practicalities of prayer in your own life. You know, I've talked about quiet time. It's not old-fashioned. Use your journal. Meet with others. You know, go to places that you enjoy going to. You know, if you're not one for, God, that'd be game over if I had to pray in my bedroom on my own. I wouldn't do anything. Do you know what I mean? I'm much more better out in nature. Do you know what I mean? And if I should do it, make it work for you. I know someone who used to get in her car and buckle herself in. And if she was driving alone, she used to pull the seatbelt of that seat in and buckle it in, because that was her acknowledging, Jesus, we're driving together today and we're going to have some time. I loved it. I thought it was brilliant. A bit quirky, but that's all right. You know, some of you are going to be walking to and from your placement churches as you go to work each day. Just use the time. All right? Use your... Pardon?
They would often light a candle, wouldn't they? If you look at old
Yeah.
Renaissance art, you'll see a candle. That
Yeah.
the presence of God, so they would light the candle.
Yeah.
To recognise it as
Some people do something that's really different to your personality as well. Try a form of prayer that is just so different. I know people, someone did that one year. That's right, I remember who he was now. It was about 3 or 4 years ago, and he took himself into quite a high Catholic church just to go and stretch, because he knew it would be so outside of his comfort zone, because he was from a free church and just a Pentecostal church. But because he had nothing else to lean on other than God, he actually had a really special time. I just think it was brilliant. Just stretch yourself and think about your personality as well. I know my personality in a sense of I'm better outdoors, all right? I'm better in nature. I tend to pray big picture prayers. I tend to pray insightful. If I'm praying for you, I'll go all insightful on you. Those of you who are in my small group are starting to pick that up now. Sorry about that. But that's my style of prayer. Some of you will be much more, I don't know, you'll pray differently and maybe with more detail and things like that. But I think it's important that we do that. So personal reflection, you can maybe do at the end, just 3 areas you're strong in. And I think it's important to acknowledge your strengths, because there will be some areas of strength in prayer, whether that's, whatever that is for you, whether it's praying in tongues or whether it's praying for other people. All right, so there's a list there as well. And maybe 3 areas that you want to develop in. All right, maybe think of 3 areas you want to develop in this year in terms of your prayer life. Yeah? And just one last thing to say. I wish I had a whole session on this around strategic prayer. But I think it's great when we just pray generally. But I also think there's power as well in praying specifics as well. So if you do want to ask for prayer, you know, from someone, and you know it's to do with the area of self-image or self-worth, find people who will pray specifically into that area. All right, as well as the general stuff, because that's important as well, but finding key people to really pray for you specifically, and when you pray for other people as well, and asking what specifically do you want prayer for. And it may be that you sense you want to pray specifically for someone in a particular area, well, just go for it. Yeah? Should we move on to fasting 20 minutes before dinner? And then I'll test you. You can't eat. I'm kidding.
Yeah, dinner's cancelled.
Yeah.
Coincidence? I think not.
Some of you are probably praying about tonight's cabaret, aren't you? Do you know what I mean? You might be on your knees later. So.
Yeah, did you not know? Well, flip.
That's why he was doing it again.
Oh, you can be trash.
Oh, Scott, you're brilliant. That's tonight. Brilliant, Scott, bless you. So fasting.
I thought you knew.
Is anyone fasted?
No.
That's okay. There'll be a mixture in this room. Yeah. Food or something else?
Something else.
Yeah.
I
Both?
did like a Daniel diet.
A Daniel diet, a Daniel fast. Yeah, we'll talk about that in a bit. Yeah, absolutely.
I did all social media for a month.
Social media for a month, other things, absolutely. Yeah, great. Booze.
Blinking hard.
See you just wiping out a Captain Sun before.
Back to school.
The hardest thing is I fasted it in September, which was hard. So in theory, I could have been drinking alcohol for the last 3 days. Not solidly, because that would have been really wrong. But,
Sitting there with a flask.
but yeah, so here you go. It's continued. My fast has continued.
Look at that, Laurie. Oh, gosh. The Lord will bless you abundantly.
Yeah.
So fasting is, as you've now discovered, there will be a mix in this room of those of you who have done it, those of you who haven't, and that's absolutely fine. All right? So it's okay if you have never done this, but it's a voluntary denial of something in your normal activities for the sake of spiritual growth. That's the definition of it. So the types of fasting that we have got in the Bible, we've got a total fast, which we see in Ezra and Esther, which is no food or drink. All right? So you can't do that for very long. All right, just a little word of caution. Okay, you can't do that for very long. So please don't set yourself for the next month doing a total fast. 40 days and 40 nights. Let's not do that. All right, so a total fast is food and drink for quite a short space of time. All right, and you've got to hear from God on this and be accountable in this as well. Don't ever do fasting on your own in the sense of don't tell anyone. All right, yes, don't go and shout it from the rooftops. We know the Bible talks about that. But at least let someone know. A supernatural fast, which is your 40 days and 40 nights, because it doesn't make sense, you should die. All right, hence why it's called a supernatural fast. And unless God says to do it, don't do it. All right, this is another one of those where you need to be accountable. All right, and hear very clearly from God on this one. All right, I would never advocate if you haven't heard from God and are certainly not journeying it through with somebody. We've got a normal fast, which is just your food. Okay, we've got a partial fast, which is the Daniel diet, eating veg and all sorts of delightful abstaining from meat and all that sort of stuff. I know loads of churches that do this sort of thing. Proclaim fast, so corporate fast. We see that in Esther, where the people of God fast for a particular people group, and they do it to hear from God for specific help or deliverance in Esther's case in that. And directing people towards God, which we see Jonah about Nineveh. All right, trying to get a people group to turn back to God, but they do it together. Have you ever done a fast as a church? Yeah, you're doing it right now. That's a proclaimed fast. Yeah, great. I think it's something really powerful when we stand together as Christians and do stuff like that. Again, in terms of our own personal walk with God, again, Jesus fasted, so therefore it's arguable that we need to do that as part of our spiritual disciplines. Okay, but again, Jesus' teaching centres more on the motive more than the method. Again, so again, it's about heart. All right, it's about heart. It's God initiated. Okay, so there is a sense of obedience, of just doing it anyway, not to necessarily get something, but I'm going to do this as an act of obedience. We can't earn anything from God, but it does. Fasting does something. It puts us in a place of dependence. Whatever it is, it gives space to God. I fasted TV for a month. When was it? A year ago in January. Brilliant. I tell you what, the time you suddenly realise, I don't even watch that much TV, to be truthful with you, but the time I discovered I had was incredible. And my friend who I was living with at the time, we played games, we made stuff, we did all sorts. I say we made stuff, she made stuff. I made cups of teas, because I'm not creative in any way, shape or form. But I got books read, we had all sorts of chats about all sorts of stuff. Do you know what I mean? So it's really, I don't know, there's something quite amazing that can sometimes happen when you give up stuff. Did you find that with social media, Scott? Just time? When you gave up social media, what did you find?
I found that I didn't know what to do before I was going to sleep.
Yeah, yeah.
Sit there like, do I read a book?
Yeah.
Well, it's the 21st century.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, especially now when we do things like that just before we go to bed and the first thing we wake up, I'm just going to check whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe what would that look like, giving that over to God, or just even giving God 5 minutes of your time?
The sad thing is when you actually, so you do that for a month and then you go back on and the notifications and messages and everything else hit the roof. And on one hand you're like, oh, this is crazy that I've missed so much. And you're also kind of like, everybody else is stuck in this loophole.
Yeah, absolutely.
So bad.
I remember my mate actually saying if they went off social, if they just stayed at his house and they stayed off social media for a week, people would have thought he was dead.
Yeah. I don't doubt it.
I mean, it was freaky.
Very scary. Social media is a wonderful, wonderful thing, but there's also a little bit of a suck in, a draw in, really. Addiction. I was trying to avoid that, but actually, you're right.
It's labelled as an addiction.
Yeah, I know. I work in schools doing some self-esteem stuff with girls, and it's crazy. It's like if you took their phone away, it's like an organ.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm just as bad. You know, I'm not great. You know, but I'd like to think I'm slightly better than that. But it is what it is. You know. But the key questions we need to maybe ask ourselves as we go into a fast are maybe, is God asking something of me? When am I going to do it? How long am I going to do it? What is the nature of my fast? What am I going to fast? What are my objectives? Some of you might want to engage in some fasting as you go through your year and God starts to highlight maybe areas that he wants to speak into, like father heart or self-image or things like that. It might form part of your action plan. Okay, fasting isn't a way, though, just to be clear, to reach God. All right, that's religion. All right, that's other faiths do that, not necessarily fasting, but they find a way to climb up to their gods. But actually, it's in a way that sometimes enables God a bit of space to reach us. All right, and it's for him, not us. So it's not about getting it and then being disappointed when nothing happens, but actually, you know, actually our reward is in fasting. We can choose. It comes, you know, it's from and for God. I think just to be clear, actually, I will say this now. I always say this at some point, but if you have an issue with food, my advice is don't fast food. All right? I believe fasting can be other things. Some people disagree with me on that, and that's absolutely fine. They think fasting can only be food. I think if you've got an issue with food, either, you know, and that will feed something unhealthy in you, either around dieting or starving yourself or things like that, to be clear, I would not advise you to fast food. Find something else. All right? Just to be absolutely clear on that one as well. God is God, and he'll see your heart and meet you in whatever. All right? Purposes of fasting are as an act of worship. All right? There's some Bible references there. It's an act of obedience, so it crosses a number of things. It just puts us before God. All right? I'm very strategic when I choose when to fast. I'll share a bit in a bit. It deals with our unbelief. It can help counteract that. It disciplines us, helps us hear from God and bring clarity. All right? It can intensify the effect of prayer. I've seen this year more than I think I ever have done. I did it a bit on my DNA year as well, but you know, things I was really battling against, you know, I did fast certain things for a while, and before making big decisions this year as well, I did certain things. Releasing effective power, so it's more of Holy Spirit, less of me. Okay, these are just some of the purposes of fasting as well, and for deliverance in us and others. You know, it talks in the Bible where Jesus sends out a couple of disciples and they come back and they say, oh, it didn't quite work. Jesus, you know, what should we do? And he says, you know, this thought can only be delivered by prayer and fasting. So there is an acknowledgement sometimes that there is an emphasis on fasting and prayer as a teamwork thing going together. All right. Benefits. Just your relationship with God. You know, that should be it alone. I think that's the top one for me. Produces an environment to hear more clearly from God. I've seen that in my own life where I've fasted, and actually I've seen God speak to me about crazy stuff that actually was so obscure but revealing roots in my life and things like that. He did it only a couple of weeks ago. It was amazing. Just lies that I was thinking in terms of living with around my own fathering and father heart of God, around being trapped and things like that I was taking into marriage, which wasn't helpful. God just suddenly revealed it, just out of the blue. I was like, I felt better immediately. It was great. You know, so faith can come, deliverance, guidance. You know, if you're seeking an answer to a decision, you know, you're wanting to know next steps and stuff, you can put all these things in place. It just sometimes puts you in a space with God to hear better, maybe for some healing. It might be for yourself or someone you know, protection, self-control, some things like that. Social media is a great one. It doesn't mean necessarily self-control in other areas, but actually it's got a bit out of hand in my life. I know I'm on my phone or whatever. Actually, I'm going to fast that because actually it might do me good. I've done that with sugar before, refined sugar. It was great. My appetite went up. I needed to have like 4 or 5 square meals a day, but, you know. But I think it's really important that we just think about that in terms of, actually, is there something I could fast here that actually will be helpful in terms of my own life and disciplines. Just some practicalities. Don't wait for a crisis. Try and make it a regular thing. I'm not talking about every day now, but make it a part of your week or part of a month, or every 2 months I'm going to do this. And enter your fast with positive faith. Expect something. Don't put your faith in fasting, though. Put it in God. But go expectant for him to speak to you, but be open to how he's going to speak to you. All right, try not to narrow it down. You know, do it out of obedience, not obligation, because that will feed into some of your views of God. If you feel like you've got to be a dutiful son or daughter, that will feed into that. Don't do that. You know, try and do it as actually, God, it's me and you today. You know, start with an achievable goal. I'm fairly sure God may not want you to go on a 40-day fast for your first time. All right? But it might be starting by missing a meal. All right? It might be just something small like that. Or I'm not going to go on social media for the day. That might be too much. I don't know. Might not go on for the morning. I don't know. Whatever. And don't spend your time thinking about what you could be eating. All right? Don't walk past the bakery, all right, and just smell those lovely smells. That's not going to bless you. All right? My other thing on that, actually, is so I have to be really... Actually, I'm not fasting food at the moment because I've been quite poorly and lost a bit of weight, so it's not really wise that I fast food. But before that, if I was fasting food, I would make it so that it wasn't a time I was around my parents or they would pick up on that, particularly my dad, not so much my mum. My mum understands fasting. But my dad, that would be game over. It would be an immediate block. It would be another thing he can be angry at God at. All right, because he was just like, why are you giving up food for God? Why is he asking you to do that? Well, he wouldn't even say that. He would just be angry. So I just wouldn't do that, all right? I just wouldn't choose to do that because it doesn't make sense. If I know I'm going out for a meal with friends, I wouldn't do it then either. You know, so it's just about thinking just a bit practically what day is going to be best. You know, and again, don't pick a day where you know you are up from 7 and a bed at 11 just filled with stuff. 1, because your energy levels... probably not going to make you feel particularly great. And 2, where's the space for God going to come? You know, try and, in the beginning, choose it when you know you've got a morning or an afternoon or an evening with God, and just trying it out and going on an adventure with it as well. And just set clear objectives. I'm not really a planner, but if I do have a day like this or a time like this, I will set some certain things. I will make sure I'm out away from things that can't then come in and encroach and things like that. Just one more thing I would want to say actually about fasting before I leave you to write your forms is, if you have a go at fasting for the first time, or you try something a bit different to what you're used to, and you mess up, please don't be angry with yourself or condemn yourself. All right, please don't do that. God's not. I've done it before where I've messed up. I've forgotten. That's a prime one with me. I forget all the time, and I'll just eat something. I'll be like, oh, today's fasting day, or do you know what I mean, or something like that. You can pick it up again, you know, just put it down and be like, oops, or just restart it another time. You know, God's not going to be angry with you or religious about it, you know, but sometimes we can be very quick to feel guilty and very quick to condemn ourselves, you know. So it's about just being easy on yourself and being kind to yourself. And then I think God just wants us to go on an adventure with him sometimes as we grow in maturity and we grow in some of these areas.
So I've only ever fasted when the church has called for a fast. So you're talking about regular fasting.
Yeah.
What would you recommend? Is it, it's not like once a year, once a week? What
That's a great question, Helen. Yeah, I'm trying to think what I do. I'm not regular. I don't work like that. I just sort of, I might think one week, oh, actually, I'm going to have some time this week where I do fast and pray because I know I've got space on a Thursday morning, so I'm going to make sure I go off. I just think you just start integrating it in gently and start with a meal or start with breakfast or start with social media or some chocolate. I know loads of people have done that, fasted chocolate. I've done that several times.
So more regular and it's personal.
Yeah, because I think that's great that you do that, but I wonder what it would look like for Helen, just to have a little explore of what it would look like to do it for Helen and personal in your walk and relationship with God. I could probably do with doing the chocolate fast again if last night is anything to go by, Eleanor. I woke up in the middle of the night and just rammed a 12 down my neck and woke Eleanor up doing it, but I barely remember it. That's a frightening thing. Yeah, I probably should do that. What's even more alarming is I kind of knew it was going to happen because I put a 12 next to my pillow. I'm on the top bunk, so it was a calculated effort. No, right? It's not like I just got up. So, yeah, maybe I should do that. But, yeah, just have an explore with it is what I'm saying. I don't think there's a hard and fast rule. But at this stage, if you've never done it before, just start small and just see where you go. Particularly as things come to light from this week, you might think, actually, instead of that morning where I look at social media, or instead of that morning where I have my chocolate bar at break or breakfast or whatever, I don't know, anything, or I watch that program at night, instead of that, I'm just not going to do that, and I'm going to spend the time reading that book on this issue that I'm facing. I'm going to spend some time praising and worshiping, just solidly doing that. I'm just going to spend some time with God about this, just talking to him and allowing him to talk to me, even if I don't hear anything at first. You know, just start small and, yeah.
Thanks. So my thinking of fasting was so narrow.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And I'm other people's opinions may differ from mine, just to be clear. They might be much more fixed about fasting. I've got friends who are very fixed that fasting should be food. And if you break it, well, you know, that's not okay. My experience of God is not of that. And I think God is much more creative and sees the heart. For me, it's all about the heart. So if you know, he'll know what is sacrificial for you to give up. And he'll know what your heart is in that time. Even if you manage 5 minutes or 5 hours or whatever, you know, I think God knows what we're going for. And if our heart and motives are pure in him and as pure as they can be in him and desire to be closer to him in a particular area or for him to come to us in a certain area, that's my God, you know. That's the God I've come to know and love as I've journeyed through some of these things. So can you see how key Father heart is and how key self-image and self-worth are? For me, it all comes down to those two. If you've got an issue in any area, it falls into those two camps. All right? I'll leave you to fill in your session impact form and maybe those 3 areas that you're strong in. You know, don't worry if you haven't got 3, all right? If you've got 1, just celebrate it, all right? Just celebrate. Celebrate what you can do, all right? Because we're all on this journey. I am. I've learnt new styles of prayer even this year. You know, and I've been doing this teaching session for 10 years. So, you know, it never stops. And maybe 3 areas or 2 areas you're really going to maybe have a go at this year, whether it is fasting or whether it's, do you know what, I remember doing a thing where I said the Lord's Prayer every day. I was just going to do it. I do. That's all right.
That was fantastic.
That's from my nursing days, that is. When I was a nurse, I used to put it there, so if I was doing any procedures or anything like that, if a pen was there, it would drop out, so I always used to pop it in my hair. So I still do that now.
Is that thermometer?
That's it, everything's back there.
Oh, you need a periscope.
That's it. That's it. I can test you.
It's just really random. You could just pee in the spoon.
I shan't be putting it in the back there. Has anyone ever done a crafted prayer? The Lord's Prayer is a crafted prayer. Has anyone ever done? So a crafted prayer is when you might be worth, maybe it's a challenge for you guys actually, to come up with a crafted prayer for your year. So it's a prayer that you make up, you decide what words you want to use, and that's the prayer you pray all year.
Right. Yeah.
That's
Some-
kind of personal proclamation.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I know Will and I have just done that, going into deciding where we're going to live, because he lives West Country and I live East Country, so it's like, where are we going to go? So we came up with a crafted prayer that both of us prayed every day that, I can't remember what we put in it now, but it was stuff around laying our own agendas down, laying fears aside, really heavy stuff to make sure our hearts were pure and to hear from God in that. And we prayed that every day for about a month or so. God rocked up. He's coming to me in Norwich. Bless him. And that came from me. I was open. I was absolutely open to moving. But, God started to speak. Because we needed to get rid of it. Because there's all sorts of fears and like, oh my gosh, leaving. And once you get rid of all of that, and that was what the first half of our crafted prayer was, I think the second half of our crafted prayer was around what we wanted for our home and where we wanted to be, like as in church and stuff. And it just all... Yeah. In this case, it just all fell into place within that month. But it was a really powerful thing to do when you come up with your own, your own prayer for yourself or for a situation, where you put the words to it and you pray that same prayer, like the Lord's Prayer, same prayer every day or every week or whatever you decide. I think that was what you were referring to, wasn't it, Ross, in terms of what you... Will and I's crafted prayer about where we live. Was that the thing? Yeah.
What I'm doing for our house and for my work, and it's been very good my work there.
Yeah.
Give us a way to focus a bit easier, really.
Yeah. Because otherwise it can feel too much sometimes praying for certain situations, can't it? It can feel a bit like, oh gosh, that's so big. Or you've been, like with my dad, I've been waiting so long. Maybe I'll do a crafted prayer for my dad. That might be a good idea, actually. It's just come to me. Just to focus me so I don't have to find the words every time, but I've actually written something that's personal and, targeted. That's the end of the session. I think it's the end of the session. Is that right? Is it tea time now?